Hey guys, my name is Katarina. I'm an empath and I'm doing this 30-day challenge talking about empaths, our abilities, our challenges, how to navigate the real world, and how to survive in it. I've done 3 videos so far. One talked about how to navigate, well, at least what have been some of my experiences with romantic relationships, what are some of the struggles that I've experienced being an empath, being in romantic, intimate relationships. The second video talked about eye contact and how it's different for some empaths, why some empaths may avoid it, what it does, what we can experience through eye contact, and the meaning of all that. The third video, which I also just recorded today, has talked about why it's so important to honor your instincts, why it is so important to honor your intuitive feeling when you feel that something's off, and what have been some of my experiences with that. So now I want to talk about how to tell if someone's an empath. I've had that situation come up yesterday where I was attending this public event. It was very exciting. It was very kind of business directed and professional and very kind of formal in a sense. And one of the presentations, the keynote speaker, very well-known football player in the past, now a coach and also a public speaker, he was making a presentation that totally blew my mind. It surprised me. I was not expecting that. I was expecting to hear some kind of like a motivational speech, which it was, and then some, because it was a speech of a person who is definitely an empath. And I felt it so deeply. And I was really shocked because the speech touched on a lot of these subjects of empathy and how important it is to recharge your energy, how important it is to realize when you're in your feelings and you're acting emotionally, how important it is to connect to other people and to understand that all the people are essentially the reflections of the people that they have met and learned from. So much information. I mean, these are just a few things. The presentation was like almost an hour long. It was incredible. It was life-changing. And the person who made it, who is a pretty well-known public figure, I did not expect to hear that from him. With a sports background, with this kind of a lot of publicity around him, I was kind of expecting something, I don't know, something else. I wasn't expecting to hear this empathic, empath-centered presentation talking about empathy. And so I had to ask him a question about how he learned to deal with being an empath, and that's going to be the subject of my next video. But what happened was I had a conversation right following that presentation, right following my question, with a good friend of mine who came up to me, who was also at that event, and she asked me, I told her, oh my God, listen, this person's an empath. I'm so like blown away by this. What an amazing coincidence. And she said, oh, you say this about like every guy that you see or meet or whatever. She was kind of like a funny little, like kind of like a joke. She's like, how do you actually tell when someone's an empath? Like what makes you think he's an empath? And that caught me off guard a little bit because I knew this person presenting was an empath. When I meet someone who is an empath, I know immediately. A lot of my friends are empaths. They might not realize it sometimes, but sometimes they do, and they tell me, listen, I think I am an empath. And I'm like, yeah, I've known this forever now. So it made me think, how do I actually tell when someone's an empath? Is it just because I am one and I just kind of sense them? So I figured out a few ways to tell. Number one is these people usually feel deeply the pain of others. And it shows in their action. They act with this heightened awareness, and sometimes very self-consciously so. They are very mindful of trying to not hurt someone's feelings. They are very aware of how their words can impact other people. They are very cautious as to what and how they say something to make sure they don't hurt others unnecessarily. And that comes from the empath ability to feel other people's feelings. That comes from being able to just watch someone or see someone and become aware of how they feel without them necessarily telling you. So that is definitely one of the characteristics. The other characteristic number 2 is empaths tend to know without knowing, so to speak. As an empath, I know I have this ability, and I know other empaths do as well. When you are able to perceive information that was not ever shared with you, and that goes beyond emotions. That can be like a human lie detector. When someone is lying or being untruthful or being dishonest or being two-faced, an empath can usually see the real truth. They might not say it, they might not announce it, however, they are aware that something is off. Very keenly aware of that. And they are also able to tell when something is either wrong or something has changed. Like, say, in a professional relationship, when someone comes up and says, oh yeah, everything's fine, everything's working great. If you're an empath, you are able to have this intuitive awareness that there is something going on when it is, but it's not being really shared with you. So it's a very useful ability, but it's also a very uncomfortable ability, because sometimes you don't want to be the whistleblower. Sometimes you don't want to call another person out on their lie. Sometimes you don't want to stand out by disagreeing with the rest of the group or not being, compliant when you know that something's going off or something's wrong. While everyone else is unaware. It's tough, and it's really kind of tough to be in that place and to have to act out on your intuitive feelings without external confirmation. But that's part of being an empath, and when you don't act out on it, you usually regret it. That's what my previous video was largely about. Video number 3, where I talk about why it's important to act on your intuition, your intuitive hunches. So number 3 is an empath is someone who can be very extroverted, but who needs to recharge. And what I mean by recharge is they need to be either on their own or in an environment where they're safe, somewhat alone, or where they can have their own space. Because an empath absorbs a lot of other people's energies. We are very sensitive to people's moods, to people's pain, to people's mental states, to people's insecurities, to people's fears. And that's what allows us to help others in these cases when they need our help and they ask for it. We're able to see what's actually going on, and sometimes we're able to let that person know what's going on, because they might not. They might be blaming it on themselves, they might be feeling unworthy, they might be feeling fearful, but an empath can tell you, listen, for example, you might be emotionally drained, you just need to take care of yourself, or hey, you've been doing too much, you just need to take a pause, or listen, this person in this relationship is taking advantage of you, so you're feeling this, but it's not really you, it's the situation that you're in, so maybe you need some distance. These are some of the things that an empath can tell you, but because we absorb other people's emotions and their feelings and their thoughts and their insecurities and all that information, that's not really about us, it's about that person. When we walk away from that conversation, that doesn't really go away anywhere. That doesn't disappear on its own. Sometimes that information is stuck with us, and we might inherit these feelings from someone we just talked to. We might absorb their feelings and then start feeling them. We might absorb their fears and then start feeling them. We might absorb their state of depression and start feeling depressed. It might sound a little much, but it's very true, and that is much, and it's hard to deal with. So an empath, when I see one, usually is a social person regardless of they're an introvert or an extrovert, regardless of their style of communication, they tend to care about people, and they tend to bring a lot of themselves into every conversation that they have with others. But they also tend to be someone who needs alone time to recharge. Again, no matter their conversation style, no matter their style of communication, they need that time to restore themselves to their own energy, to who they are, without all the information that they picked up from others. So me, when I'm seeing an empath, that's usually the person who is very present, but at some point just kind of shuts down and either walks away or goes home or needs some alone time, or they start being very depleted and kind of almost dysfunctional because they haven't gotten any alone time recently. They haven't gotten any time to recharge. So they're kind of running on empty and still trying to give. And that's also something that happens to empaths. Number 4, an empath is someone who has special abilities. I think all of us humans have special abilities. We all have special talents. We all have gifts that we were given to share with the world. Now, whether you're a religious person, spiritual person, or someone who doesn't really concern themselves with that, still, there's something, I believe there's something more than just us humans. And that's something creates every one of us humans in a unique way, that we all have something special to bring to the table, to the world. So I'm not saying that empaths are the only ones who have gifts, but I've noticed that empaths usually have these abilities that are a little more, as you might say, psychic. So, and these can be also different kinds of abilities. Some empaths are more connected with other human beings. They're able to really read a lot of information about other humans and have prophetic dreams about their friends and have these hunches when they know something's about to happen to another person, or that other person is in need, and then that person calls, or that other person, is having a panic attack and they call them and it turns out to be true. So having these kind of intuitive, coming seemingly from nowhere, information, updates about people in your circle, people that you care about, even dreams. Some empaths are very connected to animals. They are almost able to speak the animal language, not literally, but they're able to communicate with animals very well. They're able to attract animals to them. They're able to know what the animal needs when, say, they're sick or something's wrong, and they're able to help animals in that way. And they're also very kind of connected to that nature aspect, where animals and insects and all sorts of living things are kind of drawn to them and seem to not be afraid of them and get really close to them, like birds and any other kind of animal. So I've seen that, and it's also pretty amazing. Some empaths are way more connected to plant life. They are, again, same kind of way. They're very aware of the plant's health and what happens to the plant and how the plant is, and they love plants and they love spending time in nature surrounded by plants, and they usually have a lot of plants, and that's also a very special ability. Some empaths are connected to crystals. I would put myself in that category. I have a lot of crystals. I've always been very drawn to them. To me, crystals are living beings. Believe it or not, even though they're inanimate, they still have the ability to grow. Even though they're on a completely different time cycle than, say, humans or plants or animals, and it takes them a very long time to grow. If something can grow, I feel like there's life in it. Maybe it's a different form of life, but still, I wouldn't call them dead, because to me, they are living beings. And I've always been interested in geology or geological museums. I always feel so good walking into this geological museum where you can see these giant big rocks and crystals. As a kid, as an adult, I love having crystals at my house, even within arm's reach. As I'm recording this video, there's a crystal right here, which is an amethyst, and it comes from Arizona. And then there's another crystal right here, which is just a quartz crystal, and it is from Egypt, that I found on a Jeep safari when I went to Egypt when I was 12. So even I'm recording this in my kitchen. Even in my kitchen, I have some crystals. I have crystals all over my house, and my dream is to have just a home filled with crystals at some point of my life. And so there are many more types of empaths that have a lot more special kind of like maybe psychic abilities. There are empaths that are really good healers. There are empaths that are really good social workers. There are empaths that are very connected to children, and helping children is their passion because they feel children, and they feel and understand what they feel when a child is not even able to really express that. There are so many different types of empaths, but they do tend to have these almost supernatural abilities. But of course they're natural. They're just maybe not as publicized or not as normalized in our society. But they do tend to have these almost extrasensory awareness of whatever it is that they are passionate about, whatever it is that they are connected to most, whatever form of life they are connected to most. And these abilities usually make them struggle quite a bit in life because they don't feel it's appropriate to have these talents. They don't feel that it's normal to have these abilities. They don't feel that it's allowed to practice these abilities without being called out or being stigmatized or being just kind of prosecuted or bullied. And a lot of empaths experience bullying earlier on in childhood because their peers might think they're a little off or weird or stand out. And of course, as kids socialize, that can sometimes be pretty cruel. But this is another thing about empaths. Number 5, empaths are really giving, and sometimes at their own expense. So an empath is someone who can't very easily disconnect. An empath, because of our sensitivity, because of our awareness, heightened awareness to how other people experience life, how they feel, what they are, what they think, we have a really hard time telling someone no, or saying, you know, listen, I need some time to recharge, I can't help you right now, or just saying, listen, this is too much for me, I can't deal with this. Because we're so aware of where the other person is coming from, we want to give ourselves to that person to help them, to make them feel better, to do everything in our power to give that other person an ability to lift themselves up from wherever they're coming from. And that can really be at our own expense when we don't have much to give, or we are running on empty, or we are low on energy, or we are feeling down, or we are feeling depressed, which happens to everyone. But when you're an empath, you're kind of under the pressure to say yes and give. Not because someone's really pressuring you, but because you are so connected. You're so aware of how they feel and where they are. And if it's a really dark place or another person's really struggling, it's almost impossible to turn that person down, even if we can't help just because we don't have enough. We still tend to say yes, and that can be very damaging to an empath, to our mental health, to our emotional balance. But that's part of being an empath, is that awareness. And so an empath, unfortunately, tends to be someone who doesn't really have really good boundaries to protect themselves and their energy. And unfortunately, they also can be victims of energy vampires and narcissists and people like that. No, I'm not saying everyone is like that. Some people do learn to establish solid boundaries, and I'm on that path. I'm not there yet, but I'm learning, and that's definitely one of my goals, because I've definitely been completely boundary free, so to speak, and it has hurt me in a lot of ways in life as an empath. But a lot of us unfortunately learn the hard way, and we don't learn by starting to build these boundaries. We learn by having our boundaries either be completely absent or be abused by people, or be just constantly crossed and destroyed because of how sensitive we are. and how much people come to rely on that sensitivity that we have to help them, because we're the only one who can relate on that deep level. And another thing, number 6, about empaths is that we are so aware of how everyone feels and what the energy of the room is, that we tend to endure a lot, and conform to things that really make us feel out of place and uncomfortable, because we are so burdened by just the thought of making people uncomfortable and causing a rift and causing a situation and causing some kind of a drama. And we stay and we endure and we tolerate something that is very unfair, that is very damaging, that is very not good, such as being stuck in a job where you are completely disrespected, such as being in an environment where you or people like you are constantly put down or oppressed in some kind of a way, such as, being compensated unfairly for the work that you do because you put other people's interests above your own, and you have trouble saying, listen, I need to have my needs met. So we tend to, besides having kind of weak boundaries, sometimes we tend to stay in that place of suffering and being treated wrongly and unfairly for a long time, either until the situation resolves itself somehow, or until things just blow up in our face, or until it gets so bad that we break down and finally walk away. And it's a very sad thing to say, because I've definitely been in these situations several times where I stayed and it got worse and worse, and then finally just all blew up. And I'm learning to not do that anymore. I'm learning to have higher respect for myself and my needs, and to not be afraid to express when something's going so wrong, to not be afraid to fight for who I am and the respect that I deserve, and for my needs to be met. But it's not been an easy journey, and as an empath, it sucks, because I'm very aware of all the inconveniences I cause for others, all the ways that I stir the pot, all the people that are going to be affected by this, and it's overbearing to even consider doing something to speak for myself or speak up or challenge the situation that forms, because I feel terrible, and I have so many reasons not to, that of course are not my own best interests, but everyone else and the person in charge and all of that and the whole organization. So many times it has happened where I would just not say anything or do anything and just be with it, and then it just would all just really come to a very dramatic crash. And it's a difficult thing to learn and to incorporate. Number 7, an empath is someone who, it's very hard for us to be selfish, or like to just do something just for the sake of ourselves. So when it comes to looking out for yourself first, or even asking for something for you, for your needs, it becomes a big challenge, because it feels like we aren't good enough. With all of our awareness, all of our sensitivities, all the reads that we get on other people and the situations and everything around us, it's very hard to justify even having needs as an empath. We're so aware of all the problems and all the challenges other people face that it feels egotistical and selfish to have needs, let alone asking for them to be met. So an empath is someone who's usually selfless, but it's also to an extent that they let it get to the point where they are in a position that they can no longer even ask for their needs to be met. They're at the mercy of others because they haven't asked for so long, they have neglected themselves for so long, that then they just have to just beg someone for help, or to just, you know, come out with this extreme problem that has developed. It's very unhealthy, but I've seen a lot of empaths, and myself included, get to that point where they don't ask for their needs to be met. They feel bad about having needs in the first place, and then it gets to the point where they're no longer surviving, let alone thriving. They're no longer able to handle just being alive anymore, because they don't have the basic resources that they need to do that, because they felt so bad about having needs in the first place that they've neglected themselves in the situation to the point where they need someone to rescue them. They need someone to help them, but not just help out, but like really just rescue them. And that makes it worse, because that makes an empath feel like a burden, feel needy, feel useless, all these negative things. But really it stems from this inability, not inability, I don't think it's an inability. I think it's a fear, and fear and extreme desire not to bother anyone and not to have any needs. It's this guilt for having needs, for having basic human needs, and having to have them met. It feels burdensome to empaths. So these 7 things are just some of the few ways that I can tell someone's an empath. When I see these signs, when I see a person exhibit any of these signs, they're definitely an empath. But I also get that read, which is something I talked about in video number 2, I think. Something I talked about in video number 2, which is I read people through eye contact. I as soon as I get exposed to a person and am able to look them in the eyes and be near them, I'm able to get a read on them. So I'm able to see a lot of things about them and how they feel and what they think and where they are and who they are as a human, as a person, as a human being. And that's one of the best ways that I can tell someone's an empath. It's all in their eyes. But if you were to ask me about the physical behavioral signs of being an empath, these 7 things I would say are top list of things that tell me that someone's an empath. So you guys, I hope this video helps. It's definitely one of the longer videos, and if you're an empath and you're going through these symptoms, and you want to talk about it because it's hard to discuss them with anyone in your circle, or you just want to connect to more empaths, feel free to reach out to me. I would love to have a conversation with you. Feel free to leave a comment or find me on other social media and send me a message. I hope you guys are doing well. I hope this video was helpful. And if you're an empath, just know that you're not the only one out there, and that it does get better. It does take effort to get better, but also know that you're important and that you matter and that you have a really important and valuable place in this life with your unique special abilities, and that you are so, so loved. Even when you don't feel that, just know that you really are so loved, and your voice and your actions and your service matters on this planet. So I love you guys all so, so, so very much. I hope you can feel my love. I will be seeing you in my next video, and until then, bye.